son. We won't hurt you. We're definitely the good guys.
At the end of X-Men 97 Season 1, the X-Men were completely torn apart. Half of the team was flung into the distant future, while the other half ended up stranded in the far past. As far as the people still living in 1997 knew, though, the X-Men had perished when Magneto's Asteroid M exploded. Season 2 picked up on this fractured timeline by splitting its three-part premiere across 3 different eras, but once the story returned to 1997, things had only gotten worse for the mutants. With the X-Men out of the picture, Valerie Cooper has stepped up and began to round up young mutants, claiming it's for their own protection. To carry out that mission, she's assembled her own government-backed mutant team, X-Factor. Let's check out all the mutants that ended up in Valerie Cooper's legendary lineup. Havoc. You guys know Havoc, right? Cyclops' younger brother and probably the poster child for peer pressure. I mean, Cyclops is one of the most iconic X-Men and even superheroes ever, so being his brother isn't an easy job. Scott Summers is Professor X's favorite student and the golden boy, so imagine how it felt for his younger brother, Alex Summers, to come out of Cyclops' shadow. That must have been tough. However, despite growing up in his brother's shadows, once Alex does cut loose, he becomes a walking nuclear reactor. Havoc debuted in X-Men issue 54, and back then he had practically no identity of his own, except, oh, you're Cyclops' little brother. And guess what? He didn't even have the slightest clue he was a carrier of the X gene. It took a couple of issues for Alex to realize and accept his newfound powers. Wearing the now iconic containment suit, which was specifically designed to keep his unstable powers in check, it didn't take much time for Alex to choose the codename Havoc. Oh, and let me tell you the moment Alex stole the show for me. In one of his earliest feats, he vaporized a Sentinel with a power blast. Damn. And if you're thinking, oh, plasma blasts, he's just like his brother, you're right, but not exactly. You see, Cyclops' optic blasts are traditionally explained as him absorbing solar energy and releasing it as pure concussive force through his eyes. Either that, or we get the his eyes are a portal to the punch dimension explanation, but we're not getting into that right now. Havoc's body, meanwhile, acts something like a cosmic battery which soaks up ambient stellar and cosmic radiation and converts it into plasma waves that he can fire from his hands as if he were a character from Dragon Ball Z. Now, while Scott became the face of the X-Men, Alex's career was very different. The Muir Island saga saw the Shadow King possessing Moira McTaggart's island facility and warping the minds of the mutants who lived there. It forced the X-Men and X-Factor into a psychic war, and as a result, Valerie Cooper rebuilt X-Factor as a government-sponsored mutant team, and surprisingly, Havoc was chosen to lead it. That was a bit of a surprise because we had candidates like Wolverine or Polaris who seemed way more suitable, but it was a big moment for Havoc, and we were stoked to see Alex Summers finally get the acknowledgement he deserved and the chance to command an official mutant strike force backed by the US government. Yup, that was a big moment for Havoc fans, all 12 of us. In the original animated series, Havoc appeared in the classic episode titled Cold Comfort, where Forge assembled X-Factor for what he called a friendly skirmish with the X-Men. Of course, nothing about the two superpowered teams blasting each other across an Arctic landscape looked friendly, but still, I love that episode. And you know why? Because for comic fans, this was one of the coolest callbacks in X-Men history. Cyclops and Havoc realized their energy attacks couldn't hurt each other. Although neither of them knew the other existed because they were both orphans, their powers established the family connection before anyone else. And now, we've got X-Men 97 Season 2, where Havoc is shouldering an even bigger responsibility. You see, since the X-Men are presumed dead, we need someone to step up and take charge, and for Havoc, that would be X-Factor. And that's why when Valerie Cooper asked the team to capture mutant children using those glowing inhibitor collars and put them in detention centers, Alex didn't see how they could be doing anything wrong. In his mind, he was actually protecting those mutants before the terrified humans did something bad to them. Yup, this is exactly what made Havoc different from characters like Wolverine and Cable, and very similar to his brother in some ways. But if we had to talk about one moment that aptly captures why you should never underestimate Alex Summers, it has to be X-Factor issue 81. In this issue, Havoc got involved in a battle with Cyber and the Hell's Bells, and at one point, he unleashed wave after wave of plasma energy. It was so damn destructive that even his teammates started worrying about how much power he was releasing. I'm sure you guys have picked up that Havoc has always walked a fine line between complete control and total overload. And moments like these remind you why almost every X-Men writer treats him with a healthy amount of respect. The scariest part is that sometimes even Alex didn't know exactly where his limit was, and that's why we loved seeing him lead X-Factor in X-Men 97. Sure, he'll always be remembered as Cyclops' younger brother, but every now and then, Havoc reminds everyone that if Scott is the perfect soldier, then Alex is the one you really don't want to explode at the dinner table.
Drop your weapons, by order of the United States government.
Polaris. You know, it's kinda unfair that when we're talking about Magneto's children, we usually only talk about Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and poor Polaris somehow gets left out of the conversation entirely. Sure, Magneto can use his magnetism to bend entire cities to his will, but his daughter, well, she's not exactly someone you want to pick a fight with either. In fact, after watching Season 2, Episode 2 of X-Men 97, I've got a feeling that many of you were asking the same question I did. If she doesn't agree with what X-Factor is doing, then why is she even there at all? But to understand that, we have to check the comics and go all the way back to X-Men issue 49, where we first met Lorna Dane. Unlike her dad, Lorna wasn't introduced as some mutant revolutionary trying to fight a war against humanity. Rather, she was simply a young woman with incredible magnetic abilities. Maybe it was a blessing, or maybe it was a curse, depending on how you looked at things, but sadly, Lorna had no idea who her real father was for a very long time, and Marvel played around with her history quite brutally before finally, fans got the affirmative answer they'd been doubting for ages. Polaris was indeed Magneto's daughter. Once that cat was out of the bag, things started to make a lot more sense. The green hair and that constant struggle between doing what was right and giving into anger, yep, she inherited a lot more than just her magnetic powers from her dear old dad. We all know how Magneto likes to solve problems. It generally ranges from lifting entire stadiums and bridges to threatening governments, but Lorna has always been a little more, well, let's just say restrained, at least most of the time. Her powers allow her to manipulate magnetic fields and generate powerful force fields, and she can even fly through the air and control practically anything made of metal, just like her papa. And of course, she can actually manipulate the entire electromagnetic spectrum, and there have even been times where seasoned X-Men have looked at Lorna and said, okay, that's enough. In the X-Factor comics, Polaris stood right beside Havoc when Cooper assembled the team. Yup, those two have a history as well, and honestly, they built one of the longest on and off again relationships in X-Men history, which is kind of impressive considering just how much competition they have. Over time, Lorna became the emotional core of the team, and whenever things started to fall apart, she would be the one to hold everyone together, or at least until Marvel decided to make her life miserable again. Because once you're an X-Man, you don't get to stay happy for long. In the original animated series, Polaris appeared in the episode Cold Comfort. There, she served as a love interest for Bobby Drake, but she did fight beside Havoc as part of Forge's version of X-Factor. As a result, when she showed up again in X-Men 97 Season 2, it felt as if we were meeting an old friend after a couple of decades. However, this time things were very different because instead of helping the good guys, X-Factor was hunting them down under government orders. You could practically see the confusion written all over Lorna's face. But then came my favorite moment of the entire episode when Jubilee confronted Polaris and reminded her of who she really was. You can practically see the guilt kicking in. Lorna ultimately sabotages Jubilee's collar, allowing her to escape and helping the captured mutant kids to flee as well. But if you really want to understand just how scary Polaris's powers can be, the comics have given us some great examples. My favorite among them is Grant Morrison's new X-Men issue number 132, where Lorna wandered through the ruins of Genosha after millions of mutants had been massacred there. Instead of just manipulating metal, her magnetic powers allowed her to perceive and project the lingering echoes of the dead, almost as if the planet itself had recorded their final moments. The pain depicted on those pages was visceral. But if you want the complete opposite, let's jump ahead to X-Men issue 5 from 2021. During a battle against the Reavers, Polaris used the adamantium inside Wolverine's body like a giant magnetic puppet and turned Laura Kinney into a living weapon before going on to save a nuclear reactor from catastrophe. Yup, that's absolutely Magneto's daughter. And that's exactly why we think Polaris is going to be one of the most interesting characters to watch in X-Men 97 going forward. Havoc might genuinely believe X-Factor is protecting mutant kind, but Lorna, well, we don't think she's so convinced.
Don't bring a gun to a fist fight.
Strong Guy. Despite being one of my personal favorites due to just how silly he is, we need to stop for a second and talk about the superhero name Strong Guy. I mean, you got names like Wolverine, Archangel, Psylocke, Cable, and then this guy walks in and goes, "Hi guys, I'm Strong Guy." It's kind of funny, and it suits him, but it also kind of sounds like someone had to finish their homework in 5 minutes. But here's the thing. Strong Guy's name might come off as hilarious, but there's really nothing funny about him. Strong Guy's real name is Guido Carosella, and he first appeared in the New Mutants issue 29 as a bodyguard for the intergalactic rock star Lila Cheney. Basically, his job was to use his mutant powers to literally get punched for a living, and every time someone hit him or he got caught in an explosion, his body absorbed more power, which only made him stronger. I know, sounds awesome, but there was one teeny tiny little problem. His body didn't know when to stop. You see, Guido kept on absorbing kinetic energy and converting it into raw strength, and that's how his upper body became so oversized. God, I envy him. Guido never has to hit the gym or count calories, but it's not exactly the sweet deal it sounds like because his muscles constantly put pressure on the rest of his body, which means Strong Guy spends most of his life in physical pain. Okay, I'm officially feeling a little bad about all those jokes, but this is Strong Guy we're talking about. Guido himself cracks jokes every chance he gets. However, with time, I realized he wasn't trying to be the funniest guy in the room, he was just trying to stop everyone from noticing how badly he was hurting. And X-Men comics absolutely love pulling this stunt. They take the happiest looking characters and give them so much trauma that it could last for 5 lifetimes. Strong Guy quickly became the personal powerhouse of Valerie Cooper's X-Factor team, and he helped establish the government-era X-Factor, which has actually inspired the version of him we're currently seeing in X-Men 97. Interestingly, he also has roots in the series from the 1992 show, and in the same episode we mentioned earlier with Havoc and Polaris, you could also see Strong Guy as part of Forge's X-Factor. Even back then, Guido looked exactly like someone you'd expect to bulldoze through a brick wall like it's just another workday. Let's fast forward to X-Men 97 Season 2, and honestly, not much has changed. He's still the team's heavy hitter, but now, instead of simply throwing punches, he's helping Valerie Cooper, and seeing Strong Guy wearing a government uniform felt kinda weird, not gonna lie. Guido never struck us as the kind of mutant who would arrest his own kind. Strong Guy's powers have always made him almost impossible to bring down, and that turned him into one of X-Factor's most important frontline soldiers. There have been many instances where Guido proved why he shouldn't be taken lightly, but if I had to pick one comic book moment for him, it would have to be his run in Peter David's X-Factor. In X-Factor issue 217 through 218, Strong Guy literally sacrificed himself to save New York's mayor, and even though he was soon brought back by Layla Miller, Guido returned without his soul. That's a tough one. Seems like Strong Guy just can't catch a break.
Well done, but I only need one of me.
Multiple Man. If you thought Strong Guy was the only one who hid his pain behind fun, let me stop you right there because Multiple Man practically turned his entire identity into a running joke, at least until everything turned into a horror story. Fans already know that X-Factor's government era was popular for trading trauma with one-liners, and Jamie Madrox might just be one of the best examples of that. On the surface, he comes off as the funny duplicate guy, but he's a mutant who can be everywhere at once and turn any fight into pure chaos. The deeper you go, the more you realize that his power is more than just a gag. It hints at the inbuilt existential crisis that he faces on a daily basis. Jamie first popped up as a supporting player and made his debut as a farm kid whose mutation caused him to create duplicates of himself every time he was hit with enough force. However, he didn't become a classic hero right away, and instead, he was shuffled off to Muir Island. But that helped with the continuity. We had Muir Island, Valerie Cooper, and government-backed mutant teams which all became a pipeline, allowing Jamie to land right where he needed to be. All of a sudden, his powers started to seem really interesting. Before Peter David got a hold of him in X-Factor Investigations, Jamie was playing a whole different game. He was sending out his dupes to live their entire lives as priests, detectives, paramedics, and other experts, and then he would pull them back and steal their skills and experiences. Yeah, I know that sounds really clever, but wait until you realize what that actually means. You see, every duplicate Jamie creates is a full person in their own right, with their own thoughts and beliefs. Naturally, some didn't want to come back, and worst of all, when a duplicate died, Jamie had to carry their death with him forever. But it's his ability to fall to pieces and put himself back together that makes him such an important member of X-Factor, and in some cases, even their leader. And of course, this single man can do endless jobs, making him ideal for a government agency. Wolfsbane! You know, if somebody asked me which X-Men character deserves a hug the most, there'd be some tough competition, but I'd likely end up saying Wolfsbane. Seriously, Rain Sinclair's life has just been one traumatic experience after another. You'd think Marvel would eventually give the poor girl a break, but nope. Every time things start to look better, another tragedy comes knocking at her door. That's part of why seeing her hunt mutant children in X-Men 97 felt so strange for me. Because if there's anyone who knows what it feels like to be hunted, or simply being different, it's Rain. Her story began in issue 4 of The New Mutants, where we first meet a young Scottish girl raised by the extremely strict Reverend Craig. Now, he believed that Rain was some kind of demon sent to corrupt humanity just because she was a mutant. And she grew up hearing that every single day. So when Rain's mutant abilities finally manifested and she transformed into a wolf, Craig did exactly what you would expect. He turned the entire village against her. We saw that frightened little girl being chased through the Scottish Highlands by an angry mob that wanted to kill her. Thankfully, Moira McTaggart found Rain before it was too late and took her in before introducing her to Professor Xavier. And boom, Wolfsbane became one of the founding members of the New Mutants. You might think Wolfsbane is eerily similar to Beast, but Rain's powers are a lot more flexible. She can appear completely human and transform into a full wolf or a wolf-human hybrid at will. Personally, I love that hybrid form because it's where she does her best fighting. Plus, she's kinda perfect for X-Factor. Her enhanced senses and speed are perfect for catching runaways. But here's the thing about Rain. Her greatest battle was never against Sentinels or supervillains. It was always against herself. Even after joining Xavier's school, all those years of Catholic guilt never really disappeared, and a part of her believed Reverend Craig might have been right. That maybe she really was cursed. Following the Muir Island saga, Rain joined the government-sponsored version of X-Factor in the original animated series, and she also appeared in Cold Comfort, which we've mentioned 5 times now. That said, seeing her in X-Men 97 feels great. I don't think she'll stay on Valerie Cooper's side for long because she knows pain, and if Polaris has already started to question X-Factor's methods, we have a feeling Wolfsbane won't be far behind. Unfortunately though, that's all we got for you today. We're so excited to see what X-Factor is going to do in this season and how their stories will unfold alongside X-Force. Also, Polaris has my heart for listening to Jubilee, and it suggests that we're going to see a lot more complicated dynamics unfolding between the teams. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, but otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see ya in the next one. Bye for now.